A millionaire tried to hide his affair with his maid, but the baby's eyes shocked him, and the truth he had buried could no longer stay hidden. What would you do if the person who once denied you, who once humiliated you, suddenly found himself exposed by the one thing he could never control, his own child's eyes? The story I'm about to tell you is not just about wealth and power. It's about betrayal, pride, and the moment when a single truth brings a man to his knees. By the end of this video, you'll see that no amount of money or arrogance can ever erase what's real. It all begins with a man named Travis Holt. At 42 years old, Travis was everything the world thought was untouchable. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with neatly combed dark hair and a jawline that carried the smugness of success. He wore suits worth more than most people's yearly salaries, and everywhere he went, people either feared him or envied him. But beneath all that wealth, Travis carried a secret. In his luxurious mansion with glass walls overlooking the city skyline, he employed many staff. Among them was Maya Johnson. She was just 23, young, quiet, diligent. She had warm brown skin, deep, expressive eyes, and the way she carried herself with quiet strength. She wasn't invisible, though Travis liked to think of his staff that way. Late at night, when the house grew still and silent, Travis noticed her. The way her laughter echoed faintly when she spoke with the kitchen staff, the calm grace in the way she moved. What began as stolen glances soon grew into something he shouldn't have pursued, but Travis Holt was not a man used to hearing the word no. One night, with rain beating against the tall glass windows of his mansion, a choice was made. Their affair began. For Travis, it was about power, about indulgence. For Maya, it was complicated. She needed the job, the stability, and fighting him could mean losing everything. But choices have consequences. Months passed. Maya's steps grew slower, her figure changing with each passing day. She carried something within her, something Travis refused to see. When she finally told him the truth, his response was nothing short of cruel. "You expect me to believe that?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with arrogance. "That you, my maid, carry my child? Don't be ridiculous. You'll ruin your own life with lies, not mine." Maya's eyes burned, but her voice was steady when she replied, "One day, Travis, one day you won't be able to deny him." But Travis turned away, certain that money and power could bury secrets. Then came the stormy night when Maya gave birth to her son. She named him Caleb. He was small, fragile, and yet from the very moment he opened his eyes, the world shifted. Because those eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were unmistakable. They were Travis Holt's. Maya stared down at her son, a mix of love and heartbreak washing over her. No test was needed. No court could deny it. The truth was written into the boy's gaze, clearer than any words. When Travis saw Caleb for the first time, he froze. His breath caught. In that tiny face, in those bright eyes, his empire of lies trembled. But instead of acceptance, his pride rose up like a shield. He turned his back, convincing himself that he could still control the narrative, still silence the whispers before they grew too loud. But life has a way of bringing truth to the surface. Maya rocked her baby in the small apartment she now lived in, far from the mansion she once worked in. She whispered promises to him that she would protect him, love him, and never let him feel unwanted. And as she did, she couldn't help but wonder how long Travis would be able to keep pretending. Because already in the glittering city around them, whispers were starting to go. People were talking. Rumors of scandal drifted through wealthy circles. And very soon, Travis Holt would discover that the one thing he thought he could bury would rise up and destroy the empire he had built.
Maya Johnson's life had changed overnight.
Once she worked in the polished halls of a mansion, carrying trays of champagne and polishing glass staircases. Now she lived in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and a rent that swallowed nearly everything she earned. But she didn't complain, not when she looked into the face of her baby boy, Caleb, her son. His tiny fingers would curl around hers, and his bright blue eyes would look up at her with a truth the world wasn't ready for. Each time Maya looked into those eyes, she felt both the ache of betrayal and the strength to keep moving forward. Life wasn't easy. Her days began before the sun rose. She worked long shifts in diners, cleaning tables, pouring coffee, and smiling politely at customers who often didn't see her as anything more than background noise. But at night, when she came home to Caleb's little smile, her heart found peace. Still, whispers followed her. Some of the women who worked alongside her at the diner whispered when she walked past. They spoke about how Caleb looked nothing like her, how his piercing eyes reminded them of someone, but they never said his name aloud. In a city like theirs, secrets traveled faster than light, but proof was harder to hold. But proof was exactly what Caleb carried in his gaze. Meanwhile, Travis Halt continued his life of arrogance and wealth. To the outside world, he was still the untouchable millionaire, the man who closed deals with a smirk and drove away in cars that gleamed like jewels. But behind closed doors, his nights were restless, because no matter how much he tried to forget, no matter how many glasses of scotch he drank, the memory of those baby blue eyes haunted him. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself it was imagination, but deep down, a small voice whispered the truth he fought so hard to deny. One evening, in the marble halls of a private gala, the whispers grew louder. Travis stood among his peers, holding a glass of wine, his smile polished and perfect. But when a man leaned close and muttered, "Heard you've got a little secret out there, Halt. Eyes just like yours," Travis nearly choked. He brushed it off with a laugh, pretending the words didn't sting, but his heart pounded like a drum. The rumors had begun to seep through the cracks of his empire. Back in her small apartment, Maya rocked Caleb to sleep, humming softly. She didn't have riches, but she had dignity. And with every day that passed, she told herself she would raise her son with love, no matter how heavy the burden. But destiny has a way of weaving lives back together. One rainy afternoon, Maya found herself in the grocery store, balancing Caleb on her hip while she picked up baby formula and bread. As she turned the corner, her cart bumped into someone else's. When she looked up, her breath caught. It was Travis. He stood there dressed in his expensive suit, an umbrella dripping water at his side. His sharp blue eyes fell instantly on the child in his arms. For a moment, the world froze. Shoppers moved past them, carts rattled, but all Travis could see were those eyes, the same as his, staring back at him from the face of a child. Caleb blinked, his tiny hand reaching out toward the man he didn't recognize, but was undeniably connected to. Maya's heart thundered. She tightened her hold on her son and whispered, "Don't you dare." Travis's jaw clenched. Pride and fear battled within him. He wanted to look away, to pretend again, but the truth was alive, right there in front of him. His breath shook as he muttered, almost to himself, "It's impossible." Maya's voice cut sharp and steady. "You can run from the truth, Travis, but you can't erase it. Not anymore." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the aisle, frozen, his mask of control crumbling.
That night, Travis couldn't sleep. He saw Caleb's face every time he closed his eyes. Those blue eyes were mirrors, forcing him to see the man he really was. For the first time in years, the millionaire who thought he owned the world felt powerless. But the story was only beginning, because soon the whispers in the city would grow into shouts. Soon the truth Travis tried to bury would explode into the open, and when it did, no amount of money, power, or pride could save him.
Travis Holt thought he had built walls strong enough to keep out the world's judgment, but walls built on lies always crumble when truth begins to seep through the cracks. For weeks after the encounter at the grocery store, Travis tried to convince himself it had been a fleeting moment, just chance, just imagination. But his mind replayed that scene over and over, the way the little boy looked at him, the way those piercing blue eyes mirrored his own. He couldn't forget. And worse, other people had begun to notice too. At the office, his assistant paused once when she glanced at a photo on her phone. She didn't say anything, but Travis caught the flicker of recognition in her expression. At the golf club, a business rival smirked across the table and said, "Holt, your legacy might be growing faster than your empire, eh?" Travis forced a laugh, but his hand trembled on the glass he lifted. The whispers were everywhere now. Maya, meanwhile, carried on with quiet strength. She had no interest in Travis's world of luxury and lies. She focused on providing for Caleb, working extra shifts when she could, sewing little patches on his clothes to make them last. To her, the whispers didn't matter. Only her son did. But she knew one day the storm would break and she would have to face it head on. That day came sooner than either of them expected. It started with a photograph. One evening, a customer at the diner snapped a picture, Maya with Caleb on her hip, smiling tiredly as she balanced a tray in her other hand. The photo found its way online. At first it seemed harmless, but someone, somewhere, saw what others hadn't. The boy's eyes. Blue, striking, unmistakably familiar. Within hours, gossip blogs began to circulate the picture. "Mystery child resembles millionaire Holt," the headlines blared. Some dismissed it as rumor, another wild story in a city obsessed with tearing down the wealthy. But others believed, and Travis felt the weight of every headline pressing down on him. Calls began pouring in. Journalists, investors, even his own board members. They wanted answers. They wanted truth. And the one thing Travis had spent years avoiding was suddenly unavoidable. At first, he tried denial. "Ridiculous story," he snapped in board meetings. "Baseless gossip." He slammed doors, threatened lawsuits, called it all nonsense. But behind the scenes, he was unraveling, because denial could never erase those eyes. One night, after a particularly brutal day of damage control, Travis sat alone in his mansion. The silence was deafening, the ticking of the grandfather clock echoing through the empty halls. He poured himself a drink, but even the burn of whiskey couldn't drown his thoughts. He pulled open a drawer in his study, and there it was, a photograph from years ago, a company retreat, staff smiling, and in the corner of the picture, Maya standing with her quiet dignity, her eyes downcast, the same gentle presence she had always carried. Travis's hand trembled as he stared at it. He remembered that night, the choices he made, the words he said to bury the truth. And now, the truth was clawing its way back to the surface. Meanwhile, Maya's world was shifting too. Strangers came into the diner not for the food, but to sneak glances at her and Caleb. Some whispered in pity, others in judgment. A woman she didn't know even approached her once and said, "Your boy looks just like him. Don't let him scare you into silence." Maya said nothing. She held Caleb close, her heart pounding. She didn't want fame. She didn't want scandal. She only wanted her son to grow up safe. But the storm no longer cared what she wanted. The breaking point came at a charity gala. Travis had tried to maintain appearances. Dressed in his finest tuxedo, he smiled for cameras, shook hands, played the role he knew so well. But whispers floated around the ballroom like smoke. Every glance felt sharper, every laugh carried an edge. And then a reporter's voice cut through the crowd. "Mr. Holt, care to comment on the boy with your eyes?" The question shattered the illusion. Cameras turned, flashes exploded, and for a moment, Travis stood frozen, his mask cracking under the pressure of truth. He muttered something dismissive and stormed out, but the damage was done. By the next morning, his scandal was front-page news, and Maya, sitting in her little apartment with Caleb, watched it unfold on the television screen. Reporters debated, commentators speculated, the whole city wanted to know the truth. Maya turned the TV off. She pressed her forehead against her son's, whispering softly, "No matter what they say, I will protect you. Always." But in her heart, she knew the world wouldn't let her stay in the shadows forever. Travis, meanwhile, faced a decision that would change everything. Keep denying until his empire collapsed, or face the truth he had buried for too long. And that decision was coming sooner than he could imagine.
The storm Travis Holt had spent years outrunning had finally caught up to him. Headlines screamed from every corner. Millionaire's secret. Mystery child could destroy Holt empire. Investors whispered of pulling out. Friends suddenly kept their distance, and enemies circled like vultures. But what terrified Travis most wasn't the press. It was the silence. Maya had not said a word. No statement, no interview, nothing. And that silence was louder than any accusation. Travis knew it was only a matter of time before he had to face her. He chose the setting himself, neutral, controlled, private. Or at least, that's what he thought. It was a small park on the edge of the city, late afternoon. The leaves were turning gold, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. Maya sat on a bench, Caleb in her lap, bundled in a tiny jacket, his eyes bright against the fading sun. When Travis approached, his polished shoes crunching on gravel, Maya didn't stand. She simply looked at him, calm but unflinching, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "Maya," he began, his voice low, controlled. "We need to talk." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Now you want to talk, after years of pretending neither of us existed?" Travis winced. He glanced at Caleb, those unmistakable eyes staring back at him with innocent curiosity. He felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Guilt. "I never wanted it to come to this. The media, they're out for blood. If you make a statement, if you just deny..." Maya cut him off, her voice sharp. "Deny what, Travis? That my son exists? That you, his father, left me to raise him alone while you lived in your mansion pretending you were untouchable?" The words hit him harder than any headline. His throat tightened, but pride wouldn't let him crumble. Not yet. "I was protecting my family, my reputation, everything I built." Maya shook her head. "No, you were protecting yourself, and you left me to pay the price." Caleb stirred in her lap, reaching out a tiny hand toward Travis. The gesture was so simple, so innocent, yet it made Travis's chest ache. He reached out instinctively, but Maya shifted, holding her son closer. "You don't get to just step in now. You don't get to play father because the world found out." What Travis didn't know was their meeting wasn't as private as he thought. A photographer, lurking, waiting, snapped a single picture. Travis Holt, the millionaire, face to face with the maid he had tried to erase from his story, and the boy who carried his eyes. By the next morning, the photo was everywhere. No denial could erase it. No lawyer could bury it. The world had proof. And suddenly, Maya's silence became louder than ever. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't selling her story. She was simply living, and that authenticity made her the city's new obsession. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Neighbors whispered. Strangers sent letters of support, and others sent cruel messages dripping with judgment. But through it all, Maya held her head high, shielding Caleb from the storm. Travis, however, was unraveling. His board demanded answers. Investors threatened to pull out. His wife, Elise, locked herself in their penthouse suite, refusing to speak to him except through her lawyer. And still, those blue eyes haunted him. 2 weeks later, Maya was called into a downtown office, Travis's request, though framed as urgent business. She considered ignoring it, but something in her told her it was time. When she walked into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, Travis was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers in dark suits. He stood when she entered, tension etched into every line of his face. "Maya," he said quietly, "please, sit." She remained standing, Caleb resting on her hip, his little hand tugging at her blouse. "Say what you brought me here to hear." Travis glanced at the lawyers, then back at her. His voice was steady, but underneath it, desperation bled through. "I can fix this, for all of us. If you sign a statement, say the boy isn't mine, the press will move on. I'll make sure you and your son are taken care of." The room fell silent. The words hung heavy in the air. Maya stared at him, disbelief and anger mixing in her gaze. She laughed once bitterly. "Taken care of? You think you can buy me off? Buy him off? Travis, this isn't about money. This is about truth." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Travis pressed on. "Maya, you don't understand. If this continues, everything I've built will collapse. My name, my company, your empire? What about Caleb's life? What about the nights I worked 3 shifts because you wouldn't even acknowledge he existed? What about the doctor bills, the rent, the food?" Her voice rose, trembling with years of pain. Caleb stirred, sensing her distress. She softened instantly, kissing his forehead before looking back at Travis with fire in her eyes. "You don't get to just step in now. The world sees him, and whether you like it or not, they see you in him." For the first time, Travis had no words. His carefully crafted arguments collapsed under the weight of truth. He looked at his son, and something inside him shifted. Those blue eyes. They weren't just a scandal. They weren't just a risk to his empire. They were a mirror, showing him the man he had been, and the man he could still become. But pride is a heavy chain. Travis looked away, his jaw tightening. "I need time." Maya shook her head slowly. "You've had years. Caleb doesn't need time. He needs a father. And if you can't be that, then at least stop pretending you ever cared." With that, she turned and walked out, her son in her arms, leaving Travis alone in the cold sterility of his empire. The confrontation left Travis shattered. For days, he wandered his mansion, haunted by memories he had buried. He saw Maya's quiet strength, Caleb's innocent eyes, and the undeniable truth that no headline, no lawyer, no lie could erase. And, deep inside, something unfamiliar stirred, something Travis hadn't allowed himself in decades. Regret. But regret alone wouldn't be enough. The storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning.
Because while Travis wrestled with his conscience, the world outside was demanding answers louder than ever. And soon a choice would come that no amount of money or power could buy his way out of. A choice between pride and redemption. And this time, there would be no hiding.
The walls of Travis Holt's empire weren't just cracking anymore, they were collapsing. What had begun as whispers in tabloids was now headline news across every major outlet. Pundits debated his morality on late-night shows, business blogs speculated on his downfall, and social media was a wildfire, fueled by that single photograph of Travis standing before Maya and the child who bore his unmistakable eyes. But the greatest storm wasn't outside, it was inside his own penthouse. For nearly 2 weeks, Elise had barely spoken to Travis. She avoided him in their sprawling home, her footsteps echoing through marble halls like daggers of disapproval. Her once proud smile had hardened into a mask of quiet rage. Every evening, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window overlooking the city lights, ignoring him even when he tried to speak. "Please, Elise," he whispered one night, hovering near the doorway like a man who no longer belonged in his own home. "We can fix this. I can fix this." She turned her head, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were sharp, cold, the eyes of a woman betrayed too many times to forgive easily. "Fix it," she said softly, bitterly. "Do you think this is a broken deal, a bad quarter you can negotiate your way out of? You lied to me. You built our life on secrets, and now the world sees you for what you are." Her words struck deeper than any headline. The breaking point came at a charity gala, a place where Travis had always been king. Dressed in his tailored tuxedo, polished and perfect, he expected whispers, but not open defiance. Yet as soon as he entered with Elise on his arm, the air shifted. Conversations faltered, eyes narrowed, smiles were tight, forced. Across the ballroom, Elise spotted her closest friend, who turned away rather than meet her gaze. Donors Travis had courted for years offered excuses, avoided his table. And then came the final blow. On the big screen above the stage, as part of a slideshow honoring family and community, an image flashed that sent the room into silence. It was the photo. The photo. Travis standing in the park, facing Maya, the baby boy in her lap staring up with those piercing blue eyes. The audience erupted in whispers. Elise froze, her grip tightening on her champagne glass until it shattered in her hand. Blood dripped across her palm, but she didn't flinch. She just turned to Travis, her voice shaking with fury. "They all know, and it's your fault!" Then, in front of everyone, donors, investors, cameras, she walked out. That night, Elise didn't come home. By morning, her lawyers had filed papers, not divorce, not yet, but separation. And with it came demands. Control of certain assets, custody negotiations for their daughter, and a statement drafted for the press. For the first time, Travis realized the scandal wasn't just costing him money, it was costing him his family. His daughter, sweet Lily, had been shielded from the headlines as much as possible, but she was old enough to sense the tension. She clung to Elise, asking questions Travis couldn't bear to hear. "Daddy, why is everyone so angry at you? Did you do something bad?" Her small voice was a blade through his chest. Meanwhile, Maya's life was no easier. The press camped outside her apartment, desperate for a statement. Strangers left groceries at her door while others shouted cruel names from the street. Through it all, she moved with quiet dignity, shielding Caleb from the chaos. Her neighbors watched in awe. Many had known her only as the Maid, the quiet woman working late hours, polite but invisible. Now she stood in the spotlight, not by choice, but by circumstance, and she carried it with grace.
When asked for comment, she gave only one line to a local reporter: "My son deserves the truth. That's all." The simplicity of her words spread like wildfire. She wasn't vindictive, not manipulative, just honest. And in that honesty, she won the public's sympathy. One night, after another round of phone calls with furious investors, Travis sat alone in his study. The walls that once displayed awards, photographs, and certificates of success now seemed like mocking reminders of everything he was losing. In front of him sat two photographs, one of Lily, smiling wide with her missing front tooth, and one of Caleb, cut from the newspaper. Two children, both his blood, both carrying pieces of him. For the first time, Travis Holt, the man who had built an empire on arrogance, who had denied his humanity for pride, broke down. He pressed his hands to his face, tears slipping through his fingers. Not for the company, not for the money, for the family he was losing. A week later, Elise finally agreed to meet him, not at home, not at their favorite restaurant, but in her lawyer's office. She arrived poised, immaculate, her every movement radiating control. Travis, in contrast, looked weary, worn, his once perfect suit wrinkled at the collar. "Elise," he whispered, "I can make this right for us. For Lily. Just tell me how." She shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening though her voice stayed firm. "It's not about money, Travis, not about reputation. It's about trust, and you broke it." Her words were final. He wanted to argue, to plead, but deep down he knew she was right. That night, Travis returned to his empty penthouse. The city skyline glimmered outside his window, but he felt no pride, no victory, only emptiness. On his desk lay a single, unopened envelope, delivered earlier that day. It was from Maya. Hands trembling, he opened it. Inside was a simple note, written in her neat handwriting. "Caleb doesn't need riches. He doesn't need fame. He just needs to know his father cares. If you can't give him that, then stay away." Beneath the note was a small drawing, clearly scribbled by Caleb's tiny hands with a crayon. Two stick figures, one taller, one smaller, holding hands underneath a bright yellow sun. His breath caught. His vision blurred. The breaking point had come and gone. What remained was choice. Would he cling to the empire built on lies, or finally step into the truth, risking everything to be the father his son deserved? The answer, Travis knew, would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about love.
Travis Holt had always thought of himself as untouchable, a fortress of ambition wrapped in wealth and guarded by pride. But now, that fortress had fallen. His company was teetering, his marriage broken, his reputation shredded. The only thing left, the only thing he couldn't buy, couldn't negotiate, was the bond of family. And for the first time, Travis was willing to fight for something real. The penthouse was quieter than ever. No laughter, no footsteps, no Elise moving gracefully through the halls, no Lily giggling from her bedroom. Just silence. Travis sat at his desk, Maya's note and Caleb's crayon drawing still spread out before him. He stared at them for hours, unable to look away. The stick figures, simple, imperfect lines, carried more weight than any contract he had ever signed. Finally, he whispered aloud, as if confessing to the empty room, "I can't lose them. Not both of them." The next morning, Travis did something that terrified him more than facing investors or board members. He called Maya. His hands trembled as he dialed. Each ring stretched on forever. Finally, her voice came through, guarded, tired.
Maya speaking? Travis swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. It's me, he said quietly. Travis. A pause. Silence on the other end. He almost hung up. But then she spoke. What do you want? Her tone was sharp, defensive. She had every right. I want to see him, Travis whispered. I want to see my son. Another long silence, then softly Maya replied, He's not just your son. He's my whole world. And you denied him. Do you understand what that did to us? Travis shut his eyes. I do now, and I'm sorry. I know words aren't enough, but please, let me try. For the first time in months, his voice wasn't polished, wasn't arrogant. It was raw. Maya hesitated. Then finally, one chance. Tomorrow, at the park, noon. Don't be late. She hung up. Travis let out a shaky breath, a mix of relief and fear. Tomorrow wasn't a business meeting. It was Judgment Day. The next day, Travis arrived early. The city park was alive with children's laughter, the sun bright overhead. For once, he didn't wear his signature tailored suit. Instead, he wore simple slacks and a collared shirt, his expensive watch left at home. He wanted to look like a father, not a billionaire. Then he saw them. Maya pushing a small stroller along the path. Caleb inside, wide-eyed, clutching a stuffed bear. Travis's heart pounded. His steps slowed. For all his power, he had never felt so small. When Maya stopped a few feet away, her gaze was firm but not cruel. Caleb, she said gently, kneeling beside the stroller, this is your father. The little boy blinked up at Travis, his blue eyes, Travis's eyes, shining in the sunlight. Something inside Travis broke. His knees nearly gave out as he knelt down to Caleb's level. Hi, buddy, he whispered, his voice cracking. It's me. I'm your dad. Caleb steadied him for a moment, then reached out with a tiny hand. His fingers brushed Travis's cheek. Tears spilled freely down Travis's face. For once, he didn't care who saw. They sat on a bench as Caleb played nearby in the grass. For a long time, Travis just watched his son. His small, curious movements, his laughter as he clutched a dandelion. Finally, Maya spoke. I need you to understand something. This isn't about you, Travis. It's about him. Caleb needs consistency, honesty. If you're going to be part of his life, you can't disappear again. You can't deny him when it's inconvenient. Travis nodded quickly. I know. I swear, Maya, I'll be there. Whatever it takes. I want to be his father. Her eyes narrowed, skeptical. Words are easy, actions aren't. If you really mean this, prove it. Show up. Not just today, every day. Travis's jaw tightened. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't something he could buy his way into. It was trust, and trust had to be earned. I will, he said firmly. You'll see. For the first time in months, Travis walked home with something other than shame weighing on him. His steps felt lighter. His heart felt alive. He thought of Caleb's small hand touching his face, the sound of his laughter, the way those blue eyes seemed to pierce through his arrogance and reach something deeper. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was the first step. That night, Travis didn't pour himself a drink. He didn't stare at his empty penthouse in silence. Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. A letter. To Caleb. I don't know if you'll ever read this or when, but I need you to know something. I was wrong. I was selfish, and I hurt people I love. But I promise you this. From today forward, I will fight to be the father you deserve." When he finished, Travis folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. It was just paper, just ink, but it was a start. But not everyone was ready to forgive. Elise had heard whispers. A friend spotted Travis at the park kneeling before Maya's child. When Elise received the photo, forwarded anonymously to her phone, her hands trembled. It was one thing to know the affair was real, another to see Travis with the boy. She stared at the image for a long time, torn between rage and sorrow. Then quietly she whispered to herself, "He's really trying." For Elise, the wound was still raw, but deep down she wondered, could a man as proud, as arrogant, as broken as Travis truly change? The answer remained uncertain, but the story of redemption had begun.
Travis Holt had always been a man of speed, decisions in seconds, deals in minutes, empires built in years. But rebuilding trust, that was slow, painfully slow. Each day after the meeting in the park, he woke up with a new purpose, and each day the world seemed determined to test whether he meant it. Travis began small, very small. Every morning he sent Maya a text before work. "Good morning. Can I see him today?" Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes no. Either way, he respected it. When he was allowed, Travis showed up at the park or at Maya's modest apartment. He played blocks with Caleb, read him picture books, or just sat and listened to his tiny stories about stuffed animals and toy cars. At first, Caleb was shy, cautious, but slowly a bond began to form. A giggle here, a hug there, and once, after a month, the word Travis never expected to hear spilled from the boy's lips. "Daddy." Travis froze, his throat tightening. Maya, standing in the kitchen doorway, caught the moment too. Her eyes softened, just a little. But outside those walls, the world wasn't so forgiving. Paparazzi photos surfaced. Travis with Maya, Travis holding Caleb's hand, Travis pushing a stroller down the park path. The headlines were merciless. Millionaire's secret child exposed. Affair scandal deepens. Wife still silent. From boardroom to baby bottle, Travis Holt's fall. Investors panicked. Reporters camped outside his office. Social media buzzed with judgment. For the first time in his career, Travis didn't issue a statement. He didn't hire a crisis PR firm. Instead, he stayed silent. When his board demanded he deny the rumors, Travis shook his head. "I won't lie anymore. Not about this." Some stormed out in anger. Others stared at him in disbelief. But for once, Travis wasn't performing for them. He was standing in truth. One evening, weeks later, Elise appeared at Maya's door. Unexpected, uninvited. Maya froze when she opened it, Caleb tugging at her leg. "Elise," she whispered. Elise stood tall, her expression unreadable. Then her eyes shifted to the boy. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Caleb stared back with those unmistakable blue eyes, Holt eyes. Elise's chest rose and fell. She swallowed hard, then turned to Maya. "He looks like him, too much like him," she said softly. Maya's grip tightened on the stroller handle. "I never wanted it to happen this way. I never wanted to hurt you." For a long moment, Elise said nothing. Then she sighed. "I don't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I needed to see him, to see the truth for myself."
With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Maya shaken, and Travis, who had watched from the hallway, crushed. Travis's biggest test came one stormy Thursday afternoon. He was scheduled to close a billion-dollar merger. Every executive was waiting in the boardroom, investors on edge. But just as he grabbed his coat, his phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Caleb is sick. High fever. I'm scared. Please come." Travis stared at the screen, torn between two worlds. For the old Travis, there would have been no question. The deal came first, always. But now, he dropped the contract folder on his desk. "Cancel the meeting," he barked to his assistant. "Sir, but the merger." "Cancel it," he repeated, already rushing toward the door. That night, Travis sat beside Caleb's bed, a cool cloth pressed to his forehead, whispering softly until the fever broke. For the first time in years, Travis didn't care about stock prices or board votes. He cared about one thing: being there. The next morning, Maya walked into the kitchen to find Travis still asleep on the couch, his jacket draped over him. She paused, studying him. This wasn't the man who had denied her, who had abandoned their son. This was a man trying, stumbling, failing, but trying. When he stirred awake, she handed him a cup of coffee. No words, just a quiet gesture. For Travis, it felt like a bridge, small, fragile, but real. But just as things began to heal, another storm was brewing. A tabloid obtained leaked photos, Travis cradling Caleb at night, Maya resting her head on his shoulder. The narrative shifted. Headlines now screamed, "Is Travis Holt replacing his wife?" Elise saw them too, and this time her silence was dangerous. Travis knew the truth. He wanted to be a father to Caleb, but part of him also longed to make amends with Elise, to salvage the marriage he had destroyed. He stood in his penthouse window, city lights glowing beneath him, torn between two worlds. On one side, the future with his son and the mother of that child. On the other, the wife he had betrayed but still loved. The choice loomed larger with each passing day. Travis had proven he could show up for Caleb. He had proven he could stand against scandal. But the final question remained. Could he mend what had been broken between him and Elise, or would his betrayal destroy that bond forever?
The storm that had been brewing finally broke. Elise Holt called for a private meeting. Not at the mansion, not at Travis's gleaming office, but at a quiet, neutral place, her father's countryside estate, away from cameras and reporters. When Travis arrived, he saw Elise already seated at the long oak dining table. Beside her sat Maya, Caleb resting in her lap. For a moment, Travis froze, the two women who represented his divided world sitting across from each other, united only by pain. Elise's voice was calm but sharp, like a blade that had been sharpened for this moment. "Travis," she said, "we can't keep living in half-truths. The world already knows. Our families know. We know. But Caleb deserves more than shadows and shame. He deserves clarity." Travis swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, but Elise raised her hand. "I spent years standing by your side, through every deal, every scandal, every late night, and I thought nothing could break us. But when I look at him," her eyes shifted to Caleb, who stared back with those undeniable Holt blue eyes, "I see a betrayal I can never forget." Maya lowered her gaze, guilt etched across her face. "But," Elise added, voice softening slightly, "I also see innocence,
A child who didn't ask for this. A child who deserves a father. So today, I need to know, who are you going to be, Travis? A man who hides behind power, or a father who finally tells the truth? For the first time in his life, Travis Holt, the man who always had the perfect speech, the perfect angle, the perfect mask, felt words fail him. His throat tightened, his chest ached, and then, finally, he spoke. I was arrogant. I thought money made me untouchable. I thought my reputation mattered more than people, more than love, more than truth. His voice cracked, and I hurt both of you because of it. Turning to Maya, he said, "You carried the burden alone. You raised our son while I pretended he didn't exist. You deserved better." Then, facing Elise, his eyes watered. "You gave me loyalty I didn't deserve, and I repaid it with betrayal." Finally, Travis looked at Caleb. The little boy blinked up at him, curious and innocent. "No more lies. I am his father, and from this day forward, I will never hide him again." Weeks later, Travis stood before a crowded press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Elise and Maya stood behind him, not as allies, but as witnesses. With Caleb in his arms, Travis leaned into the microphone. "My name is Travis Holt, and this is my son. For too long, I denied him. I denied his mother. I hid behind wealth and power. That ends today." The room erupted in chaos. Headlines blared within minutes. Travis Holt confesses, secret son revealed. From fortune to fatherhood, a millionaire's redemption. But for the first time, Travis didn't care about the noise. He felt lighter, freer. Later that night, Elise approached him quietly. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you. Our marriage may never be what it was, but I see you trying, and I see Caleb smiling with you. That matters." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens between us, be a father. Don't fail him." And with that, Elise walked away into the night, leaving Travis both heartbroken and hopeful. As the house grew quiet, Maya stood beside him. "You've changed," she said softly. Travis shook his head. "No, I'm just finally becoming who I should have been all along." Maya smiled faintly, looking down at Caleb. "He deserves that man." The story ended not with riches, not with power, not with scandal, but with something far simpler. A quiet afternoon in the park, Travis pushing Caleb on a swing, the boys' laughter ringing out into the crisp air. Maya sat nearby, her eyes soft, watching. Elise stood at a distance, arms folded, but present. For once, there were no cameras, no headlines, no masks. Just a man, a child, and the fragile beginnings of redemption. Because sometimes the greatest empire isn't built in boardrooms or skyscrapers. It's built in the heart.